So I'm currently the Dean and Vice President of Agriculture at Oklahoma State University, but I've spent about 25 years as a food and agricultural economist studying what people eat and why they eat it. A lot of my research is focused on consumer demand issues, how do consumers respond to new technologies and new food products, but also have had a keen interest in how those demands translate throughout the agricultural supply chain and how ultimately they impact farmers. So the recent research focuses on the market and economic impacts of pigs that are resistant to PRRS. PRRS is a disease that's endemic to the pork industry around the world, and it's exciting new development. But the question is, if this technology becomes available in the breeding herds, what happens? What happens to pork production? What happens to prices? Are farmers better off, worse off? Are consumers better off, worse off? So the research I did was to construct an economic model. It links the supply of hogs on the one hand to demand for pork by consumers on the other hand, and it does that in a way that links global trade. So you have our major pork producing countries, the US, China, Canada, other parts throughout the world, and links those to each other in terms of global trading patterns. So in that research, what we're able to do is say, if we had a 5% adoption, a 10% adoption, 100% adoption of PRRS-resistant pigs, what would happen? And the large overarching story essentially is that as adoption increases, pork production increases and pork prices fall. If you're a pork producer, that sounds like bad news with pork prices falling. But the important thing to note is that costs fall more than prices fall. So you're able to sell more pork at a lower cost. And the result is those people that adopt PRRS-resistant pigs are more profitable. It's also good news for food consumers. If you can have more pork at a more affordable price, that's great news for you. And so it's also a technology that can improve food security. There are several interesting nuances to the results that were interesting to focus on. One relates to the speed of adoption, and the results are pretty clear in showing that if you're an early adopter, you're a bigger beneficiary. So producers that adopt soonest and most quickly enjoy the benefits of those cost savings really before prices start to come down as other people adopt. So whether it's a country that adopts sooner than others or an individual producer that adopts earlier than others, results clearly show that there's a benefit to being early on that adoption curve. A couple of the other things that really stick out in the results are that the productivity increases that come about from adopting PRRS-resistant pigs are so large that a lot of the concerns people have about this technology, while real and certainly present, are kind of small in relation to those productivity gains. So for example, if some consumers say, well, I don't like this technology that's being used to create PRRS resistance, and they say, I'm going to reduce my willingness to pay for pork, it would take a really large reduction in willingness to pay to offset those productivity gains. Or even if there were changes in global trade patterns, so you get a country that says, we're not going to import pork from countries that use this technology. In most cases, it's still beneficial to adopt that technology because the productivity gains are so large. There's points in time in an industry where you have an opportunity to adopt technologies that can have significant impacts on productivity growth. And I think this is certainly one of those technologies that has the potential to offset a very significant cost that the industry has incurred for decades now. And I think the interesting question will be, does the industry do it? And it could be one of those inflection points that we look back on years from now where you really see an inflection point in productivity growth. But that really depends on the choices that producers make and that consumers make. And I think we're at one of those pivotal points in the industry. And I think it's really an important time to sit back and think about whether we want to make this step and really accelerate that innovation and productivity growth that is now available. the main benefit that consumers are going to see directly are lower food prices, and fairly significant lower food prices. Particularly if we get to full widespread adoption, you can see 10% lower prices for food consumers. So a very significant change in affordability of pork products, and that's also important in terms of competition. Consumers can have choices between what they put on their dinner plates. Other competing proteins, both plant and animal, are competing for a place on that dinner plate. Their prices are going to fall as they try to find new technologies that bring that increase productivity and bring down costs of food. So, this is not like the industry can just sit back and say, if we don't do anything, we get to keep our share of that dinner plate. That's not what happens. And so I think, the main benefit consumers would see is greater affordability. There are a lot of benefits that consumers will enjoy, but they may not see directly. Some of those benefits include things like improved animal welfare. You have lower mortality rates. You might be able to cut back on some inputs, antibiotics, and other things that might be used to treat sick animals. A variety of these things we're able to cut back on because of this technology. And even though those consumers don't see that directly, it's something that our research suggests most consumers do, in fact, care about.